Because Europe is focused on their economy, their infrastructure, and their people, the health of their people. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're going to check out how America got hooked on cars. This is a suggestion by Gerben T. Van de Veen. So shout out to you. Thanks for the suggestion. And we have right here, CNBC is the channel. The title, like I said, is called How America Got Hooked on Cars. Links down below. And it says, Americans drive much more than in any other country, twice as much as the average German, for example. And the actual experience of driving isn't quite as romantic as the image. Drivers are often stuck in traffic. Cars pump out pollution. Less walking means less exercise. Cars also can kill people. Some skeptics say, indeed, cars are awesome, but they get a lot of help from favorable policies and strong lobbies. CNBC spoke with some researchers and looked at numbers to get the full picture of why Americans became so dependent on cars. This is going to be a good video. I already know. Thanks for watching with me, guys. Like I said, links for the original videos down in the description section down there. Go over there, hit like on the original video. It's only fair. It's only right since we're reacting to their videos. So let's do it.
Cars dominate American life. The daily commutes, road trips, errands, families ferrying the kids around. You name it.
Wow, look at this. Wow, this is tough.
On the more than
This is
4
tough.
million miles of road across the United States, 70% of Americans drive themselves to work.
I don't have to drive anywhere to work. I work 5 feet from where I sleep. My bed's like right behind me. I used to have to drive to work though. Never got lucky enough to live close enough to where I could just walk to work. Never been a thing, and except obviously now doing YouTube since I work at home.
Only 3.5% take public transportation. The common explanation.
Because there's not that much. There's some public transportation, sure. There is. Very few and far in between. Mainly in big cities, New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, and it's not even that good compared to Europe's public transportation.
Explanation is this all happened because Americans just love cars and driving. The open road.
There it is.
Almost too good to believe.
My careful study of this history over a couple of decades now persuades me that the historical record shows that car domination was not the popular preference, was not voted for through democratic processes. It wasn't even the result, as a lot of people will try to claim, of free enterprise just doing its thing.
So it is economical, but I don't.
I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that, okay, so in Europe, you got a lot of cities, of course, right? And then just like every country, you're going to have the countryside, the empty land, if you will, right? The rural parts in between all those cities. But the thing is the density is so much higher in Europe. You might have, sure, you might have countryside, but if you're driving at speed, say 60 miles per hour, I don't know, whatever that is in kilometers, but if you're just driving at a normal good speed, you're probably only 5 minutes from one city to the next. Like, you're probably only going through the country 5 or 10 minutes and you're on to the next city. Whereas here, I could pick a direction and I could drive 2 hours and not even hit a city. Like, I could just go in between the cities and then drive. Like, the closest place to where I live out in the country, and it takes like 12 minutes to get to the closest town. Outside of that town sucks. It's small. There's only 6,000 people. There's nothing there. There's 2 grocery stores and that's it. Anywhere else, I have to drive at least a half an hour, at least, going on 40 minutes to get anywhere halfway substantial in size. So I think just the fact that it's just so open and spread out, you kind of have to depend on cars, and there's no public transportation, not to the degree that they have in Europe. So it's like, you don't have a choice. You really don't have a choice. So then they just play it up, of course, with the Great American Road Trip, Route 66 and, roadside attractions, and they hype it up to get you to buy the car. Of course, the American automobile, Detroit, this and that. There's a lot of companies here that make cars. So, of course, the capitalistic mindset is going to push that.
Don't care. I don't drive a car to save gasoline. I drive for fun.
Policy has been a driver of shifting what's convenient away from public transit and walking on the one hand to driving on the other.
That has downsides. It's expensive, dangerous, and, say critics, makes cities a lot less livable. There are, of course, some health costs as well. But some attempts to push back
That's
on
true.
car dominance, such as congestion pricing, transit funding, bike lanes, or pushes for walkable cities, have stoked controversy.
You know, and another thing too, just owning a car is such a pain in the ass. It is such a pain in the ass. And I'm in one of the easiest states to own a car. The state of Indiana does not require vehicle inspections. A lot of states, you have to get your vehicle inspected like once a year, once every 2 years, twice a year. I don't know. I don't live in those states, and that's how it is in Germany. Or in Europe in general, most of the places I would assume, but Germany more particular, you can't even work on your own car. Like it has to be tip-top shape. It has to be roadworthy. It has to be safe for the road, or you just cannot go on the road. Probably a pain in the ass for the poor people that can't afford to take their car to the shop. That sucks. That's why here in the United States, it is nice that if something breaks on my car, I can just go out there and fix it. There's nothing stopping me from doing so. Downside is you got a lot of shit cars on the road breaking down. I mean, there's a lot of cars on the road that should not be on the road. But when you're poor, limited income, you don't have a choice. You have to get to work to make more money because you're drowning in bills, and you have no option but a place that is a half an hour car drive away with no public transportation. Now you see why there's so many broken down cars on the road, because a lot of people just do not have the option to take it to the shop. I don't. I have to fix everything myself, and it sucks. You know what I mean? Like money's a thing. I mean, you know, we all know, ain't nobody here rich. We're all just regular people trying to get by. So, but owning a car it's such a pain in the ass, and I wish I didn't have to rely on owning a car. I like my car. I like it, but I don't want to have it, right?
CNBC talked with some scholars and looked at numbers to see how America really got so hooked on cars.
Let's find out.
There are about...
Did that say cars are subsidized solutions? How we got here? Okay, so cars are subsidized solutions. So was the government paying car companies, I guess? Car domination.
There are about 283 million registered vehicles for a U.S. population of about 341 million.
How do we not have more cars than people? I don't understand. But then again, there's a lot of people that destroy cars. Like you see YouTube videos where people buy like a brand new car and then they just destroy it. And it's like, yeah, sure, cool, whatever. You're making money, entertainment. So wasteful. So wasteful. It's hard to find a car that's over 20 years old driving around on the street because people destroy them.
Means more than 80% of Americans could technically own a car.
Right.
This graph right here shows urban mobility in Europe versus the US. Depending on the city, you can see how the population is moving around by public transport, walking, skating or cycling, or driving. In Europe, there's a pretty fair balance between those who are active, take public transport, and drive. On average, about 30 to 50.
Look at America. There's nothing going on.
50% drive, and the rest is divided between active commuting and public transport, but definitely leaning towards active. In North America, on the other hand, it is generally 70 to 90% by car. Through the years, Americans have mythologized or romanticized the open road, but many roads in the US often actually look a lot more like this.
Yeah.
On average, the time Americans spend in traffic is equal to an extra full week of work per year. That's not commuting time. That's just time lost to congestion.
Yeah.
In cities like New York.
Did it say a full week a year? I think it's more than that. Hold on. What did they actually say here?
On average, the time Americans spend in traffic is equal to an extra full week of work per year. That's not.
It's more than that. I mean, I guess it's an average. It's an average. I used to work at a factory, and I shit you not, it took me an hour and a half to get to work. Just driving one way, just one day. I worked 6 days a week there. A lot of overtime, no personal time. It really sucked. Like I was working like 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday, with an hour lunch. So I was at the factory for 13 hours plus about 3 hours of drive time. So I was gone from the house for about 16 hours a day. And then on Saturday, I only worked like 6 hours. But of course, every day, 3 hours drive time, 3 hours drive time, 3 hours of drive time. So this average is definitely an average because you got people like me that right now I don't drive to work. I work at home. There's a lot of people that work at home. So that's going to even out the people that spend the extra amount of time commuting for sure.
Not commuting time, that's just time lost to congestion. In cities like New York,
Oh, just congestion. Okay, I could see how that could be in a year frame. If it's commuting time, the numbers are way higher. Way higher.
and Chicago, it's more than twice that. It's
Yeah,
also not
I
cheap
believe
to
it.
own a car. Insurance premiums, repair costs, and vehicle prices are all near all-time highs. In
The insurance alone makes it a pain in the ass. Then you got to pay for gas, and then it's like right now I got some weird stuff in the vehicle where it's like shaking in first and second gear. I think it's my drive shaft carrier bearing. I had to replace it before. The one I bought was a cheaper one. A lot of reviews said they only last about a year, and it's been about a year since I replaced it, so I think that's what it is. But it's such a pain in the ass. You guys are lucky if you're not car dependent for sure. You don't even know. I mean, you've seen the videos talking about it, and you heard about how it is here in America. But if you're not in America, you don't know, and you don't understand the frustration. I promise you that.
2024, Americans, on average, spent more than $12,000 to own and operate a new car.
Yeah, it's not
While
cheap.
cars are in many ways safer than they have ever been, they still can and do injure and kill people. Vehicle fatalities started rising again in the 2010s after years.
The thing is, vehicles may be safer than ever before, but the people are more idiotic than ever before. The people, the way they drive, the stuff that they do, drinking and driving, and it's crazy. We're going to get through this video eventually, guys.
And in the 2010s after years of declines. The federal government has called it a national crisis. Those numbers have since fallen a bit, but are still relatively high. Between 2010 and 2023, pedestrian deaths skyrocketed too.
The USA has the worst traffic safety record of any high-income country in the world, and also
Jeez.
almost uniquely among high-income countries, the trends have not been improving over the last 10 to 20 years.
It's getting worse.
America
Huh?
is hardly alone.
And I don't understand how the cars are safer now than they ever have been. I mean, they used to be made out of steel. It's hard to find a vehicle where the body panels are actually made out of metal anymore. It's like plastic and fiberglass. Those old steel boats from the 70s, you could drive through a tree. If you build them like that and then put the modern airbags and suspension and whatnot, I think we'd have winners. I think we'd have some good vehicles out there.
America is hardly alone. Evidence suggests going car crazy is in part a byproduct of prosperity. It's not a perfect comparison, but nearly all American households have access to a car, while only about 55% of Americans have access to public transit.
And that's the 55% of Americans that live in these massive cities, and the public transportation is mainly just citywide. You're not going to have a whole lot. I mean, sure, there's bus routes, that can go from city to city, but that's about it. You're not just going to go hop on a bus somewhere in Chicago and get a Greyhound bus, sure, but not like regular public transportation like what you're used to seeing in Europe.
When Americans think of charmingly dense cities with walkable
Copenhagen.
streets, a robust bicycling culture, and great public transit, they often think of Europe.
And of course,
Yeah.
all those things are true, but there has been a change. Everybody went crazy for the car once their country got rich enough. And in that sense, we have good.
But they're smart enough. Okay, sure. Okay, let's break it down here. Each country, they got prosperous. They made a bunch of money. They all went crazy for the car. But it's showing Amsterdam right here in the thing. And the thing with Amsterdam and the Netherlands is, yeah, sure, they went car crazy. But then when it got to like a high degree of danger and like it started getting out of control in the 70s, early 70s, they started seeing like, whoa, we need to fix this. This is not going the right way. We need to gear our cities towards being pedestrian friendly and biking friendly. And we need to prioritize biking lanes instead of the cars and route the cars around the city instead of through the middle. And so far, their process is so good that it's being replicated around the world, the way that they do it in the Netherlands. So, yeah, sure, these countries, yes, they did the same thing, sure, but they didn't let it get out of hand. And when it started to get out of hand, they nipped it in the butt. They fixed the problem. Meanwhile, here in America, we're not fixing no damn problem. We're making it worse.
Company.
There is an important difference, though.
Around the turn of the century, a lot of European countries built out their public transit networks a lot more aggressively and started doing things like implementing congestion pricing, which of course has just been rolled out in one city in the US.
Because Europe is focused on their economy, their infrastructure, and their people, the health of their people. America, no. That's not what they want to do. They want to prioritize war and putting their nose in other countries' business where it don't belong and this and that and blah, 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 and have the biggest military force and buy all these bullets. And our government forgot about our infrastructure, guys. That's what happened. Europe was focused. They passed us up.
Frequently cited reason for this major distinction is the vast size of the United States and the relatively low density of a lot of American communities.
That's true.
The U.S. is more than double the size of the EU in landmass, even without Alaska, Hawaii, and the territories, but the EU has about 100 million more people.
I've never owned a car in New York City where I used to live, but I've also never taken the subway in Iowa. There is no subway in Iowa. Population density doesn't support it. It just doesn't make sense.
But even comparing a highly populated American city with a European one, like New York versus London and Paris, the numbers are vastly different.
In the early 1900s,
many American cities were built around public transit and walking, but later became car-centric. There were multiple reasons for this, but a big one was policies favoring cars. These policies were supported by an alliance of different kinds of automotive groups: car clubs, car dealers, manufacturers, sometimes even taxicab and local delivery companies. The list goes on.
It's capitalism. Everybody wanted to get rich. So who cares about the outcome of what's happening? Let's just line our pockets and push these cars and just tell everybody they have to have a car. In fact, we'll take it another step further, and we're going to start designing our cities to where if you don't have a car, you're pretty much screwed, to force you to get a car. That's all they cared about, forcing people to get cars so that they can line their pockets. Basically.
That group called itself motordom.
One of the conclusions they reached is that cities like Boston and Chicago and so on were cities where you didn't need a car. And within motordom, they said this is a bad thing because people aren't buying cars even though they could afford them. They had a term for this. They called it submerged demand. To them, a great way to deal with submerged demand was to promote a road building policy that they were already behind for reasons of moving and selling cars, but that would also promote suburbanization.
In the early 20th century, cars were far more strictly regulated than they are today. But
okay, so build the highways, force it to be suburban, so you get rid of the walkability in the cities. Let's just build these massive super highways and force everybody to live 20 minutes from any store. That'll get them to buy the cars.
Soon, the legal regime flipped in their favor.
At first, this strategy was largely directed at the urban fringe, where suburbanization was most possible. But by the 1950s, it was also invading the city itself in an attempt, unfathomably destructive attempt, to make old, dense cities places where you could drive and where you could own a car and keep a car.
A self-reinforcing cycle took shape. Investments in cars, such as road building projects, led to further investments in cars.
We often hear the interstate highway system and the 1956 Federal Aid Highway Act, which is the basis of it, are often sort of taken as the starting point of modern American car dependency. I think that is
Yeah.
much too late of a dating. In fact, one of the things that made it possible to have this enormous public works project was that by 1956, Motordom had already won most of the necessary victories over things like engineering standards, traffic codes, safety education, and so on. And once they'd won those battles, the Interstate Highway Project actually seemed like a natural next step almost.
A 1977 U.S. Supreme Court decision called driving a virtual necessity because long before then, it had become one.
This is perfectly understandable. I'm not even faulting them because this is just good business.
In 2024 alone, the automotive sector spent about $64 million lobbying in the U.S., second only to the air travel industry. There is still a legal regime in place that intentionally or otherwise favors cars and makes it hard to build communities around other forms of transportation. Schill says we subsidize cars, trucks, and SUVs in two main ways, legally and fiscally. Two examples.
This is the part that I'm interested in. I mean, the whole video, of course, but like the subsidization part. So they're so far into like, let's force people to use cars. Let's build highways. Let's make suburbs outside of the cities. Like, let's just do everything to just force them to drive cars. And then we're going to dump our money into the car stocks and get rich and all this kind of stuff. But it's not working. Subsidization is basically something that's like, I mean, I don't know, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe subsidization is like, if something can't support itself, the government basically gives the industry money off the top to make it worth it for them. Like, for instance, farmers, right? When farmers get subsidized, they're not able to make a living selling their produce or whatever, their milk or whatever, right? So then the government gives them a check every year to make up the difference, to keep them farming, because the government wants them to farm, right? So I think that's with the cars. It's like, is the government giving these car people money to get them to keep on keeping on making cars because it's not working without the subsidization? I don't know. If anybody could explain that to me, that would be amazing. I do appreciate it if you do.
Examples of legal subsidies: land use restrictions and traffic laws. First, land use. There are a number of laws around how people are allowed to use land. For example, nearly all American cities require buildings or structures to have some kind of attached parking. That is changing, but it's still really common.
It's just crazy to me that, big dense cities are
Okay.
requiring huge amounts of parking.
Some laws may not intend to promote driving.
Oh my goodness, don't even get me started on the parking garages in Chicago. I'm not even going in there. That'd be another 10-minute rant. But my goodness. Holy cow.
But they effectively do. Many communities around the country have zoning laws that
Yeah.
restrict home building to single-family dwellings rather than
terrible.
more dense structures like duplexes or apartments. Many of these laws came into effect during the automobile age.
Yeah.
Large shares of the buildings already standing in some of America's cities would be illegal to build today. These laws really require communities to spread out, which makes them difficult to comfortably traverse on foot.
So Not Just Bikes has a good video about how American city or like European cities are illegal in the United States or something, like how they basically illegalize the walkable city. And that's this zoning crap. And I'm going to say that it's crap. It's pure crap. It forces the city to not be walkable. It forces you to drive cars, which it just a whole spiral effect of all sorts of other stuff. It's not good.
Density also makes it tougher to justify public transit. Traffic laws also favor cars. Speeding is a major contributor to motor vehicle deaths, as much as drunk driving even. But Schill writes that they are under-enforced and are enforced arbitrarily, among other things. Jaywalking laws only exist because of cars. Secondly are the fiscal subsidies. Critics call public transit systems socialist, but various federal and state governments spend billions on road construction and maintenance. About $266 billion on highways alone in 2022, according to one paper.
It takes enormous state capacities, public taxpayer dollars, what some people might call socialistic government departments to make it work. To the extent that it does work, it doesn't actually produce a very efficient result. Americans spend a lot of time sitting in behind the wheel of their car stuck in traffic.
Of course, none of this means we drive solely because of some grand conspiracy by the automotive industry.
I do think
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
it's important to underscore just how awesome cars are, right? Like, people were buying them. Car ownership
cars are
doubled
great.
and tripled every 10 years for a couple decades. Like, if cars sucked, that wouldn't have happened. Now, are there negative?
But the thing is, if cars sucked at... No, cars can be awesome. But the fact is, people aren't buying cars just purely based on, oh, they're awesome. You know how many people out here are absolutely not car people? Women, guys, whatever, that they don't care what car they just want something to drive because they don't have a choice, because they're forced to drive a car. They're not like, oh, wow, that minivan is so awesome. Like, oh, I can't wait to drive that minivan. No, they're like, man, I got to buy a vehicle because I have to drive a half an hour to work. And that minivan's the cheapest thing I can afford right now. I don't know what this guy's talking about. But yeah, we can all agree cars are awesome. Cars are great. I love my car. 2003 BMW 530i, stick shift, 5-speed. It's great. I love it. But I don't want to have to be forced to drive it. What is this guy talking about?
Like, if cars sucked, that wouldn't have happened. Now, are there negative externalities of that? Of course. Have we managed those effectively? Of course not.
There also was the allure of cheaper and often higher quality housing out in the suburbs.
When you look at America today, where you see high transit ridership, New York, San Francisco, Boston, you have sort of lower income people who use transit and then very high income people who use transit. There's sort of like a bimodal split. And so if you think about Manhattan, all the fanciest, richest neighborhoods have subways. You can see how if you're really in that middle class, you can't afford that. And then maybe you don't want to live far out on the subway in Queens or Brooklyn or the Bronx or whatever. So then what's left for you, right? You have suburban America.
So while cars did benefit from policy support, people also liked and could afford to live in places where cars were essentially necessary.
American cities in 1900 were not pleasant places, so one can understand the desire to...
But they were more walkable. I guarantee you that. I'm almost 100% sure American cities in 1900, what is that, 125 years ago? Absolutely much more walkable city. Guarantee it.
To suburbanize and move out. I think context today is very different.
Cars won't vanish from U.S. roads anytime soon.
I would expect the use of cars to intensify.
Over the last 10 to 15 years, especially since the pandemic, a growing share of Americans have chosen suburbs and exurbs over cities.
Where you really need a car for daily life. There's really no indication that
the only reason Americans are trying to start to choose suburbs over cities is because the way the American government controls the country. Have you seen the cities? Have you seen Skid Row in Los Angeles? Have you seen the insane, massive amount of homelessness and crime and drug use just rampant in the streets? Like people just right there, not even caring, just right in the middle of the road, doing drugs with people watching, not caring. The government cannot control what is happening in the country. You don't go to Europe and see that. There's crime in Europe. Hell yeah, there's crime in Europe. There's crime in all these major cities. But you're not going to sit there and go to no place in Europe and see the stuff that you see in Skid Row, Los Angeles. That is why people are choosing to go to the suburbs, because they want to get away from the damn riffraff. Guarantee you that. Not because they want to go to the suburbs and then be forced to drive for a half an hour to get into town. I don't know. Some of these people aren't making the points that are resonating with me.
There's really no indication that as an overall trend that is reversing. I think in this country, taking steps to push people away from cars is doomed to fail and is undesirable as a matter of individual.
Liar. Not doomed to fail. You're a liar. Look at Carmel, Indiana. They took and modeled it after like Denmark and the Netherlands, and they have a very walkable city. There's places that's been converted from driving to walking. Look at Amsterdam. Look at the 70s with all the crazy car crashes and people getting run over in the street. What did they do? They got rid of it. What is this guy talking about?
From cars is doomed to fail and is undesirable as a matter of individual liberty.
No, it's not undesirable. It is not undesirable. I desire walkable cities. I desire bike paths. I swear to God, some Americans are just so effing stupid, guys. Pardon my language, but geez.
For those jobs where driving makes the most
And I'm not saying I'm smart either. I'm a dumb American myself, just saying. Opinions.
sense, we should permit driving, although we may have to charge people for the public costs of accommodating that driving, like for the road. But wherever anything else works, we want to...
What do you mean? You charge? That's the thing. Oh, well, we might have to accommodate. We might have to charge you to use the road. Right, yeah, that's what they say when they take all of our taxes. But when I'm driving down the road and I'm seeing pothole after pothole after pothole, I'm not seeing where's my money going. They're not taking the money and fixing the roads. I don't know what they're doing with it, but it's not going for what it's supposed to be going for. So yeah, sure, you can tax me all you want for fixing the road or for driving on the road to cover wear and tear and maintenance, but guess what? You better maintain it. Actually do that part because you actually take my money. You take all of our money for the taxes. But you're not coming through on your end. You're not doing your part. We have crappy roads. Almost as bad as Belgium. Sorry, love you Belgians. Just a joke.
accommodate that.
A slice of the population would prefer to live in smaller apartments and denser places if it means taking fewer car trips, walking and biking more, and taking public transit or cabs and rideshare.
No, yeah.
A lot of Americans say they like walking and biking more than driving, and some polls in the past have suggested a majority supports more money for public transit.
I think overall we'll see more reliance on cars, but I do think we'll see growth of this additional option that has been to some extent suppressed by legal constraints, by law.
A plethora of cities around the country have rolled back their parking requirements and loosened zoning laws.
We want to promote walkability. We want to permit cycling. We want to take advantage of the fact that now, thanks to electric bikes, cycling is something that is more practical on more topographies for a much broader range.
More practical. Why is it more practical? It's the same thing. It's a bike. The only difference is it's being powered by electric instead of your feet. The only reason it's more practical is people are like, oh, well, I can ride a bike now and I can still be lazy. I don't have to do any work. I'm very opinionated today, right, guys? I slept good. I got some good coffee in me. Everything's great. It's a good day.
Cycling is something that is more practical on more topographies for a much broader range of people if we would only accommodate that very low intensity demand that's much more affordable to accommodate than driving.
Some measures may prove more popular than they seem at first. New York enacted a congestion pricing plan in January 2025 to reduce traffic in the city, but it came after some intense legal battles.
In the literature, among people who study cities, there's this debate over whether policy should try to push people away from cars with a stick or whether it's better to use carrots. And
just model it after the Netherlands. Pretty simple. Just redo the cities just like the Netherlands redid Amsterdam in the 70s. And not just Amsterdam, of course. I'm only referencing that because that's the video that I watched that was explaining it. But all across the Netherlands, they redid their stuff, and it just works. It just works, guys.
And I think this is kind of a false dichotomy, and congestion pricing shows that, right? On the surface, it's a stick. If you're driving during peak hours into the congestion zone, you have to pay the fee. But it's also a carrot because you can drive much more easily and quickly for that price. And as a consequence, that creates a stream of revenue that can be used to strengthen public transit.
But the thing is I don't think that's going to slow down the people driving through. If you need to drive through the city, you're going to drive through the city. You're just going to have to pay that fee. I don't see how this is going to cut down drastically. It's just another way for them to make money. It really is, with the excuse of, oh, it'll cut down congestion. What, 5%? 10% at most? Come on. If anybody has to go somewhere, you're not going to just change your plans because you don't want to pay $9 most of the time. You're just going to deal with it, right? Because you don't have a choice, because you have to make that doctor's appointment or whatever it is you're going to the city for.
But strengthening the case for other transit options, especially investments in public transit, requires making them cost-effective. NYU's Transit Costs Project has shown that the U.S. pays a lot more for public transportation than many peer countries. The first phase
Why? What? We pay more for what? For what? We don't have hardly any. Our public transportation is just in the big cities. Phase 1 of the Second Avenue subway is the most expensive subway built in the world on a per kilometer basis. This is about 10 times more expensive than the Italian and Swedish subways discussed in our other case studies, and more than 10 times as expensive as the Turkish subways we examined. What about the one in, is it Moscow or St. Petersburg? I think it's St. Petersburg. There's a massive subway, and it's like, I think one of the most deepest subways. Huge subway, elaborate, I mean, immaculate looking subway. Why would ours cost more? People skimming off the top or what? I don't understand, but.
The first phase of the Second Avenue subway in New York City cost 10 times the amount of comparable systems in Italy, Sweden, and Turkey.
People can interpret some of our work as being anti-transit. It's not the case, of course. But what you see in the US is just very little output for time and money.
The U.S. could reduce costs several ways, such as by adopting practices from low-cost countries, standardizing designs for stations, not overbuilding, and holding agencies accountable for budgets. But public transit also has to compete in terms of time. It takes about twice as long as it does to travel by car. That also doesn't have to be the case. Caltrain, a commuter rail line in the San Francisco Bay Area, electrified its trains, which sped up trips. The group also doubled the frequency of service.
That oftentimes puts you in, striking distance of driving. And then it's like, okay, I get those 10 minutes back. That's awesome. I'll take it.
Ridership jumped 17%.
But the thing is it might take longer, but you're not driving. So you're just sitting. You're relaxing. You're not actually having to pay attention to the road and all this kind of stuff. So you can relax. You can get some work done on your phone. Maybe if you got your laptop, you got to get some, whatever, right? So you can kind of take advantage of that time a little bit. If anything, just to relax before you go to work. So you're not focused on driving and all that.
% overall and 38% on weekends.
Hold on.
Okay, I get those 10 minutes back. That's awesome. I'll take it.
Ridership jumped 17% overall and 38% on weekends in its first.
Well, yeah, if your trains are going faster and stuff, of course you can get more customers on it for sure, more passengers, right?
First month of service.
All right, so that video was amazing. It's by the channel CNBC, like I said. Go check it out. Hit like on the original video. There's not really a whole lot to say now because I've already been saying a whole lot of stuff throughout the video. So drop your comments down below. Do me a favor, hit like and subscribe. Have a super fun, awesome day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, bye.